And I could also cover a little bit about the kind of the journey I took personally with the business and the journey that the business come on since it started in 2017. So if I probably spend 5 or so minutes just going into that background, the rest of everything I talk about will make a lot more sense. My background in this space starts in probably 2007-ish. So I was working for the Ministry of Defense in the press office, looking at the height of the Iraq and Afghan conflicts. So basically front page news every day dealing with those issues. And then I went to spend some time in country in Iraq, in Afghanistan, providing media advice to the armed forces there on how to engage, not just with the media internationally, but how they engage with local journalists, which was fascinating to come up against really effectively the Taliban on the information side of the campaign, to really try to counter those, their own propaganda. And that was not fake news, it was outright propaganda. And then coming back to the UK and to work in counterterrorism, where I was doing the same thing, but facing off against Al-Qaeda's single narrative, if you're familiar with their methodology. So really interesting time there. And I spent some time in kind of the probably most challenging parts of my job, actually, going into Muslim youth centers, trying to explain our foreign policy, which was difficult, right? Just because I look like this. And trying to understand how to gain trust and how to explain our foreign policy to those guys, and seeing the look in from a 7-year-old child, looking you earnestly in the eyes and saying, why is it only Muslims in Guantanamo Bay? Which is a good question and a tough question. And it was there I started kind of getting a lot of education in terrorism and counterterrorism and the narratives to support terrorism, and realizing the impact of narratives, realizing the impact not just on those children, but on their futures and on our future economy and all the knock-on effects caused by rogue narratives and unhelpful narratives. So I spent some time in that area, and then went into Middle East strategy and various other things. Then spent the last 10 years in AI startups. So really looking at natural language processing and machine learning and the algorithms that have now formed a kind of a bedrock of many parts of our commercial ecosystem. Then that brings us pretty much up to today, where I really wanted to get back to work on that kind of PR and communications challenge. Reached out to FACTMATA, who were working on exactly that kind of problem. I, like many people on this call, probably deeply passionate about, we've got to solve this problem of fake news, got to solve this problem of disinformation. We've seen it hit the mainstream. We've probably seen it in our own families and friends, the impacts that it has had. I know from my dad is 100%, he must be prime target for every single conspiracy theory going, because he constantly sends emails, oh my God, look at this, you've got to get to the highest hill in London because there's a tidal wave that's going to be caused by this, probably what it was, the earthquake that was going around, right? He's prime target for that. And I've seen over the course of the last 10 years, he's become more and more extreme in his views because of the way that these funnels work, where they try and target you with some of those slightly more outlandish ideas. You're liking and sharing that content. Oh, great. And that means you're targeted for more and more extreme content. So I've seen that funnel in action. And I reached out to FACTMATA to help on the problem, and took over as CEO in April. And in this period, working with Drew Galati, the founder, who have realized effectively that disinformation and misinformation and the way that we need to work on fixing it and targeting it is actually different than potentially what we might have started out as. So we started out as a fact-checking organization. How do we prove that this is a lie and that this is a fact? And we engaged with experts, I mean, some of the brightest minds there was in terms of kind of building those algorithms and trying to do that research. And after nearly $4 million in the best part of 4 years, realized actually there is no AI technical solution to fact-checking right now. It's just not possible because of the subjective nature of the truth, right? To identify a lie, you have to understand what the truth is. And the truth changes daily. So it's not just a matter of subjective nature, it's a matter of a temporal problem, that what is a lie today may be truth tomorrow and vice versa. So we kind of went on this journey of realizing, well, it's really hard to identify disinformation specifically from a purely technical play. You've got to have fact checkers, you've got to have humans in the loop, which brings its own challenges around bias, around efficiency and cost. So there are other players in the market right now focusing solely on how do we make it the most efficient way possible, that fact-checking team working. We are an AI business. We always want to be a tech business. So our realization over the course of this term is if we're going to be an AI business, we really effectively need to be picks and shovels company in the gold rush, if you're familiar with that saying. So the people who made the money in the gold rush weren't the people looking for gold, it's the people selling picks and shovels. So our aim is to develop the tool set to allow other organizations and other companies to find those nuggets of disinformation and misinformation for themselves. In which case, we don't have to worry so much about the bias. We need to make sure our algorithms are on point, but effectively we're providing an indication. We're highlighting, we're flagging content that people can use to basically put human in the loop and find that kind of content for themselves. Fast forward to where we are today, we are doing that, but have realized again that actually, even if we do that well, there still isn't enough money in that for a commercially sustainable business to do it. So we are selling it to brands, PR agencies, social media agencies. These are the people who need to fix these lies. If you're seeing a lie about Pfizer's vaccine giving you brain cancer, it's Pfizer's PR team that need to fix that particular lie. If you see a lie about Adidas having slaves in their supply chain, it's Adidas's PR team that need to fix that lie. This is our realization that we can't have one single company owning what is the truth. We've got to provide the tool set and allow other people to do it for themselves. So long introduction, but that's kind of the context of the journey that I took and the journey that the companies took to today.
Okay, so that, first of all, that's amazing. I didn't know you had such a deep background in, like, you know, the deepest spheres of disinformation, which usually comes from warfare and things like that. I mean, that's really amazing. So you've seen it all. There's just a couple of points. I mean, you said so many amazing things, but I think teasing out the whole, like, it's a fact today and it's not a fact tomorrow thing, you know, like if I was a brand or a company, then I would say, like, how can they even keep up with that? Because I mean, knowing the chains of commands, especially for like multinationals and things like that, like, you know, can you even like keep pace to keep the truth current? Yeah,
for sure. So there's ways of brands to help with that process, because fact checkers need reliable data sets in order to speed up the process of, someone says that you know, the GDP of the UK is a good example, right? The GDP of the UK, the National Office of Statistics has that number, and it's accurate as the point that they last released it. So a really good place. If you're a fact checker, you know where to go. That's where my stat lies. For brands, I think as an individual brand, making sure you've got easy access to your truth is going to be a really good thing that a brand can do to help with that. But actually, individual brands themselves aren't where the solution to this lies. I'm doing a talk in a couple of months for a European food standards agency, a pan-Europe food standards agency. And they're bringing together big players from across industry. And that's actually where I think this needs to lie. So the food industry needs to agree what the truth is. And in this example, it's going to be, I'm no doubt, a lot of talk about, is soy good for the environment or not? You know, are we creating a bigger challenge by trying to chop down rainforest to produce this stuff if we just left the rainforest there? You know, those kind of questions, the fake news and the disinformation narratives that play into those, the industry needs to come together to agree what their truth is for those particular facts and those particular lies. Because individual companies having slightly different variations, that's where the problem creeps in. That's where people can creep between those facts and create their own narratives. So I think industries coming together more so than individual brands is where that would be really, really helpful.
Yeah. And we can circle back on that, because I do think some of those things I just started the top of the call with, not everyone was on, about this, like, it's like, you know, you have these shadow operations in order to push, you know, just like contractors and things, like, what's not really governments, you know, like, it's like, you know, it's a very layered operation. And then I know, just coming from ad world, I know there's a lot of people really trying hard now to really call out these big companies, like you say, for just finding the disinformation that they're being placed next to, and really challenging companies and doing that tracing. And no longer could that be a black hole. Like, it can't, you know what I mean? So I think you're right in saying that, but yeah, so that's all fascinating, and we can get back to questions on that later. But the only other thing I really wanted to highlight, which I thought was quite unique, and Vinny and I were kind of talking about this, was just the I guess the positive side. Like, it's not just like fighting the negative of the, you know, the disinformation out there. It's like learning, and it's almost like a learning tool, as well as like a just like a baseline, of finding the positive news and how to promote that. And I thought that was a really cool side of it. It's like if you could talk more about that, and just, it's almost like a two-sided approach is sort of how I read your offerings.
Yeah, for sure. It's I guess what we realized is we started in just trying to find the bad stuff, but going to that point of no one's going to pay for that. If people won't pay for it, it's not a commercially sustainable solution. We need to find a sustainable solution for this.
Yes.
So those same PR folk are just as interested in finding trends to get on top of as they are harmful narratives to avoid.
Yes.
So exactly right. So the way we've now approached our tool is effectively it tells you what is being said and what is going on. It will highlight to you those narratives or those trends which are particularly racist, sexist, toxic, those kind of things that brands don't want to be associated with. But it'll also tell you using, this is kind of a relatively new innovation, a stance model. It'll tell you what the narratives are that are actually really for you and the influencers that are really for your brand or your cause. That I think is something I didn't talk much about previously, but the other thing to mention is we just got to move away from sentiment in general. Sentiment, which has been around for 10 years, it was sketchy when it was first invented. The idea that looking at the words someone uses and saying, well, these are positive words, gives you any indication of their meaning or their intent is just ludicrous, but it's all the industry has more or less right now. So moving that towards a stance model, which actually shows you it doesn't matter whether the words they use are positive or negative. What matters is their intent and their meaning. If their intent is positive, even though they're using really angry words, the intent is what you're after. So getting towards stance is really important, and that highlights many more narratives which otherwise would be missed, but actually super positive. They're truthful, they're factful, and they're positive for the cause. That we've got to do both if we're going to be commercially sustainable in this sphere.
And I also just wanted to this is more of again, like an ad placement type of question. But, I know that there's a lot of talk now about how like people tried to have these words, like you mentioned, like these pitfalls of like a racist comment or a sexist comment, right? And so they try to have these these blocking words, right? But, there's a lot of criticism now that a lot of those words kind of block out a lot of activism. And so I know that a lot of this group is trying to be very, positively proactive in activism in terms of companies and whatnot. And it's like, sometimes, do you do more harm in blocking these things and avoiding good conversation? Because I think the trend now is to bring more people's beliefs and more belief systems, into a business fold rather than avoiding anything just controversial, if you will. That's kind of changed.
Yeah, for sure. That's a massive, massive problem because all of the content moderation kind of research previously has been around identifying those words and blocking the content. But if you put that into the ads market, the programmatic ad space, then all the outcome of that will be is people realize I'm not going to make any money if I focus on this problem, right? Because I'm probably not going to pick up any ads for that page, and that's not going to be helpful, inventory. So for sure, that is a massive, massive problem, and it's a whole topic in itself. The ads.txt fraud that's going on between the harmful providers putting out not just racist and sexist content, but the more supportive sites who aren't in and of themselves harmful or toxic. They wouldn't get picked up, but they're funneling cash to those more extreme sites. That whole network the guys over at Double Verify, Check My Ads are doing really good work on that.
Yes,
it's
exactly. No, I follow that.
Fundamentally flawed.
It's crazy. Yeah. No, I just
so,
think
but
like,
sorry, I just want to answer your question. I forgot to answer your question, which was that we can't just use individual models to flag, red light, this contains sexist content. You have to put that together with other models. So we've got satire, humor, emotion. It's the combination of those models you need to rely upon now to go, yes, this is heavily sexist, but actually, you know what? The satire score is off the chart. So this is worth looking at from a human perspective because it looks like it's covering it in a humorful way of bringing good, positive attention to the subject.
Yeah, and that's why I like was saying that even in this talk, I was like that you were tackling it from all sides, like adding the human part, adding the people that you choose to hire, like people who are like smart enough to get those layers, because you don't want to have you don't want to not be part of the conversation if it's edgy or if it's just getting started or, you know what I mean, or just be out there, but you just want to avoid the the big ones that are, you know, intentionally being manipulated to drive you in a certain direction, right? So
Yeah.
that's great. So it's so comprehensive. I was fascinated by it. So I don't want to take all the time. These were just stuff I had and I thought were really interesting thought starters. And anyone else who has any questions, please jump in. Just unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yes, hi, I have a question. So my name is Nadia Al-Fatasi. I just give a very brief context of my question. I worked at NATO for almost 2 decades. I was also deployed, was very much involved in disinformation. And I would love to have your views basically on the shift of paradigm, because when I was working at NATO and the disinformation campaigns from the member nations were very much focused on kind of still Cold War mentality, state to state. There was, it involved then also counterterrorism and then cyber came in the play as well, which is now very important because now with the remote workforce, now with the fear levels and anxiety levels all over the globe, that disinformation is actually kind of intertwined or blurred with cybercrime. And I work with emotional intelligence to minimize the pain of cybercrime. So I say building emotional firewalls. But I do find it fascinating that one aspect is, okay, how do you flag? How do you bring awareness? But the other aspect is that people perceive the world based on their mental model, based on their affect, their mood. So even if you come up and flag with the truth, right, they still may not be perceptive. And this is what the populist agenda, at least how we viewed it in NATO, was not, we were kind of losing the war between speaking to people's hearts versus their minds, right? Using statistics and facts to speak to people's minds instead of, you know, speaking to their hearts. So I was just wondering, as a startup, as the tools that you use, how do you see this evolve? Because it's one way to flag awareness, but people perceive the world based on their mood. And because of the shifting paradigm post-COVID and the consciousness levels or the anxiety levels, whatever you want to call it, with everything that's going on, disruption fatigue, it will make it much, I don't want to be pessimistic, I am the optimist, but it will probably be very difficult to mitigate this. So I'm just interested in your views on that.
Yeah, there's an awful lot there, and that was really good stuff. And I think we probably have a lot of interesting conversations if we caught up after this. So to go to the NATO angle, to the state on state Cold War mentality, for sure, I think a lot of people have got into this topic of fake news, or think about it because of the Russian influence on Brexit, or the Russian influence on the 2016 election and 2019 election. I think that is potentially problematic for our democratic facilities and our democratic functions, and it is a huge problem. But that is the one form of fake news or disinformation I've not worked out how to commercially fix, because that's really difficult to get anyone to pay you any money for doing that. The side of it that we're working on, and the side of it that I think has grown through the fake news entrepreneurs, right? Looking at the COVID misinformation is an excellent example of, it's not state on state. Those are individuals who have worked out a really clever way of making an awful lot of money by exploiting the algorithms of Facebook and Twitter, etc. So I think the way this is actually transitioned from state on state disinformation through to just entrepreneurship, these are people just making money. These aren't, in a way, these aren't bad people. These are people who are making money in a way they've worked out how to make money, as people do. So they're doing their best to get around the rules and the balances that Twitter and Facebook have in place. But frankly, we are enabling these people to make the money by creating misinformation and allowing them to share it, and allowing our friends and our families to be influenced by it. But effectively, they're not breaking the law right now. They're doing exactly what we're enabling them to do. So it's really interesting to me, this transition from pure, not evil is the wrong word, because everyone's the hero of their own tale, right? So I'm not going to, call the Taliban or Al Qaeda evil. They, they believe in what they're doing, and for the reasons that those individuals do it, depending on which level of the hierarchy you're at. But these people aren't out to kill people; they're out to make money. So I think it's really interesting. It's a complete transition, like most things do, from the ideological straight to the financial. So I think that's really interesting, and that's definitely where we're focused. So the COVID misinformation, which impacts Pfizer's bottom line. Well, if I can sell this tool to Pfizer and they can use it, they can prevent that, great, I've made the world a better place. But I've also kind of sustained the business. I can now invest in more tools and help more kinds of organizations. To your other points in there around the mentality and how people receive the misinformation, disinformation, I think this is challenging, but there's a multi-threaded approach to how we need to respond to this. Our little part of this puzzle is, can we help a Pfizer identify the narratives that join together those posts so they can go and target that particular part of the internet, right? If you imagine there's a whole bubble of conversations, Pfizer has a little part of this, their little responsibility to fix this part. Likewise, Adidas needs to fix this little part here, and Starbucks needs to fix this little part here. And we all need to take responsibility for fixing our own little conversations that we're involved with. So can we provide the tool set to enable them all to do that better? And if we do that, great, but that still won't fix the problem, because individuals who are already knee deep into those kind of misinformation and conspiracy theory groups and likes and shares are already quite far extreme. I remember showing my dad a number of times. I showed him the, I can't remember the name of the group now, that creates the media bias chart, right? So you've got from factual to non-factual to right to left, and you've got all the different kind of charts of media providers. I showed him that chart, and this is back when they only got halfway through, and Fox News was quite on the right. And he looked at Fox News, goes, Fox News, that's way too liberal. I was like, oh crap. So he's already been passed all the way down that funnel to the point where Fox News is too liberal for him. He's now like way off down here. So the challenge is there's nothing, Pfizer, because he's already lost trust in those entities, right? It doesn't matter what they or I can do. And I'm not going to say it's completely too late for my dad, but we need to definitely, in order to prevent more people, getting that far down the line, digital literacy is a massive part of this, and that's got to start all the way from schools, all the way through schools, all the way through kind of college and into the workplace. Teaching people how to interact with digital media, I think, is probably one of the more fundamental parts of this puzzle. So it's going to take a lot, and there's a number of other things we could do. So it's like a multi-threaded approach to tackle this. We're definitely not going to solve this one by ourselves. We are just highlighting the content, but we've got to make sure people are receptive to it, and that does take humans. That takes effort. So yeah, I haven't exactly worked out the soft solution to my dad's issue right now, but to our children, I hope, like my first child is on its way in October, and I hope that by the time my child engages in social media, which at this rate will be in week 6, then I hope that we've got better digital literacy kind of programs in place for them. Sorry, a long answer, but there was a lot there. I think we'd probably have an interesting conversation at some point in the future.
Thank you. Does anyone else have another question?
I do. So the reason I initially reached out to FACTMATA and Antony is because, first of all, I was intrigued when I looked at the site about the level of complexity of the product. As you said, it's like an evolution of what was originally offered, kind of a simplistic analysis of what was being said. And you did already mention a lot of things that the company has added to what they offer to other businesses. But I was also intrigued by some of the tools that are available in your site for just everyone. Because yes, I think it's clear to me how companies can use the technology that FACTMATA offers to fight against bad narratives. But I also thought it was interesting how, as you also mentioned right now, you're working to find ways to use that technology to help people learn more about the quality of the content that they're consuming, and also helping them engage in more productive conversations. And as someone that also has a father that is struggling to navigate through the ocean of bad data that is being overwhelming us, I just wanted you to talk a little bit more about those tools that are currently available, and if you have plans to offer anything else for the general population. Yeah,
no, good question. So when we originally built our models, we used training data that was available at the time. So we engaged with lots of specialist annotators. For our clickbait model, for example, which is often kind of misinformation, disinformation aligned. For our clickbait model, we engage with journalists who are experts in plotting the difference between clickbait, not clickbait. Likewise, when we, for our hate speech model, we engaged with a number of different charities who specialize in dealing with hate speech and dealing with victims of hate speech. So we engaged with specialists to get the models in the first place, but those models need updating over time. And people's perceptions of what is hate speech, and what is toxic, and what is sexism also evolve over the time. So, what was sexist in the 1950s certainly, would actually, which way around is that, is now almost certainly sexist now, even more so. So those models need updating over time. And the way we've countered that problem is to engage with publicly facing tool sets. So Bleeper and Trusted News, the Chrome plugin you can add to your system. The idea is engaging with the public and now enabling the current public debate to evolve around those kind of current data sets is how we keep our models live and up to date and current and relevant. So for sure, we wanted to do that. We haven't promoted them as much as we would have liked because actually it's part of the tool set where we don't need that much data to get the value we need to implement the models. So to spend an inordinate sum of marketing and PR on it wouldn't give us the return. But for sure, we've got to keep humans in those models to keep those models live and current. I think before anyone asks the question, because I know someone is thinking the question, how do you make sure that you're not getting gamed, and how do you make sure that the input from the crowd is actually making the models better? There are technical ways of doing that, both with kind of annotator agreement processes. So effectively, if 5 people annotate the same piece of content and they all agree it's clickbait, chances are it's clickbait. Whereas if there's any kind of gray areas or non-consensus based approaches, then we ignore it. So we're only taking really strong signals to improve the models. So yeah, we've got to get those tools out there. We would like to promote them more, but I think the key thing is enabling people to see that they can have influence on the models. Otherwise, you've got effectively a black box, and we are, and for any. We don't make it publicly available because it is commercially sensitive, but to partners and to clients, we make fully available all the training data that we've acquired. We show them the annotation process. We show them who annotated that data set. So we can't make it publicly available. We don't want to be a complete black box, but we're more like a slightly opaque box, a gray box, if you will, for how we go about that. Because yeah, the other challenge right now is for AI in general in the space is explainability. If you can't rely, or if you can't explain how the algorithm came to the conclusion it did, you can't rely on the results. And if you're in PR and social media, that for me is the biggest challenge. Whereas previously, and we're kind of going off a little bit here, but where PR and social media agencies previously were able to point at, look at these tweets I found, and look at what they're saying, and here's the reason why I recommend we take this stance or why we use this language. Our algorithm does all of that for them, right? Or automatically organizes all the content and shows them those results and shows them here's the graphs. But that increases the challenge of them explaining to the client, here's how I came to this conclusion. Because the client will say, yeah, but how did this work? And so we need to make sure they can explain how the algorithms are coming to the conclusions in order for them to rely on it in their workflow. That for me is the biggest challenge with AI, not just in our space, in any space. It's explainability, not the actual technical challenge of the algorithms themselves. I kind of went off topic there slightly, but that was a point I wanted to make sure I made in here at some point.
No, I think that's great. It's great. Again, every time you bring something up, it's a million questions, but is anyone having a big question they want to put forth?
I have a question. First introduce myself. I am İpek. I'm doing PhD on misinformation in health domain. And also I'm working for Deutsche Welle, working on fact-checking tools. My questions so far, what kind of topics it was very challenging for the machine learning tools and also for the annotators?
Got it. So answering that last one first, I think there is and it's ended up being, I think, one of the reasons we ended up using specialists, because the toxicity model, the hate speech model, the racism model, that's really tough stuff. I think to put inexperienced or mechanical Turk type, people who aren't prepared to deal with that kind of content through the grinder of looking at that content for hours on end, that's really, really tough. it's tough on them mentally, but it's also tough on them to react objectively to that content. So I think one of the reasons we end up working with specialists is because these people are trained, like, you know, like I was unfortunately trained in dealing with a lot of this content. You get so used to it, unfortunately, you are able to detach. You look at it objectively. That is something that I think is really worth looking into if you're going to spend a lot of time in this space, is finding specialists and like we found charities that dealt with it. Otherwise, it can actually, I would say, don't walk into it at all with without an understanding that you could potentially do yourself quite a lot of damage from spending all day long just looking at that content. It's not good fun. And then to answer your first question around the topics that gave us the biggest challenges, I think where we've specifically found challenges is that, well, yes and no. We've done some work with clients where actually, and this is about the motivation of the team, the value for us in PR, whether or not making a difference to the world. Like we had a client who was looking at tracking pizza in the UK. It's a brand, they want to sell more pizzas. Fine, okay, we'll help you sell more pizzas. I didn't expect to find any misinformation or disinformation in that realm. Still found it, surprisingly enough. So I think the challenge is around getting, this is probably more of a commercial challenge for us, making sure companies care enough about the harder stuff, because we'll end with the challenge for us as a company is we end up just being any other media monitoring social listening firm. And if we do that, we lose the motivation of the team. I've got like a list of 1,000 people waiting to work for this company. It's just because of the mission, because how passionate people are about it. If we end up going too close to just straight out commercial stuff, we'll lose all that we'll lose investment, we'll lose motivation of the team, and we will get up in the morning knowing we're trying to make the world a better place, not sell more pizza. That said, in doing the topic on pizza, we found a lot of not very interesting things. We also found, because of a random mention of pizza in I don't know if anyone's familiar with the good Sweden, bad Sweden kind of narratives, the idea that effectively, because Sweden is seen as quite a liberal country with really progressive policies, it is a target for misinformation, disinformation from the alt-right, who basically want to say, this is what happens when you're all liberal and you let anyone in your country and all that. So basically creating false narratives around how violent Sweden is, about gun crime, rape on the streets, no-go zones. You've probably seen something like this around somewhere. And this is a challenge. We were doing this pizza topic, and pizza got mentioned in the context of one of these narratives, because someone was saying, oh, I had pizza with the head of police in Stockholm, and he said it's a no-go zone in all these areas. Complete lie. But because of pizza, we found it, and it's really weird. You can't avoid it. Like, we're just doing a freaking pizza topic in the UK, and we find misinformation about Stockholm. So it's really hard to avoid, quite scarily so. So yeah, but that's a challenge in terms of the topics. It's like, we want to work on misinformation, disinformation. We've got to be commercially sustainable, which means working with brands and offering those opportunities. But there is a risk that we end up just being like anyone else and doing, that kind of thing. I would say fact checking probably runs similar risks, which is, who are you doing the fact checking for? Yeah. Who's paying the bills? And making that balancing act is a tough one. I would say, if anyone's going to ask the question around who you choose to work for, because we're toying with this right now, we realized that if we only sold to companies who we liked, who we agreed with politically or ideologically, we'd just be making the problem worse, right? We'd one more filter effect. So we've actually come up with a way of selling. Basically, we will sell to anyone based on two factors. One, will they sign up to our terms of service, which commits them to not using our tool to share disinformation or misinformation, or to amplify disinformation or misinformation. So there's terms of service they'll have to agree to, but also, and this is the bit we're working out right now, we're getting close to, a review of their responsibility with the truth. So any company that comes to us and says, we want to use your product, if it's pizza, fine, right? Let's look at Goodfellas. Have you lied recently? Have you been sharing misinformation, disinformation on food facts, on diet and things like this? If you're responsible with the truth, if you promote facts, we'll sell you the product. If you're not, we won't. And that gets us out probably of selling to the kind of people we don't like, but in a way that is unbiased and fair. The challenge we've got is working out, okay, how do you work out if people are responsible with the truth? how do you come up with a model for that? And that's something we're working with, but we're looking at kind of potentially using off-the-shelf tools like the Transparency Org and places like this who do that kind of review of brands, probably only really large brands, but that might be the way we get about it. And I guess in a fact-checking organization, you're going to be a somewhat similar territory, which is how do you make sure that the people you're providing your facts to are going to be using those facts in the right way? Yeah. Challenging problem.
Cool. Karin, do you have anything? Or Linda, I just want to make sure, Tess, I just want to, Alexander, I just want to make sure everyone gets something in.
Thanks a lot. I don't have any specific questions at the moment, but very, very interesting topic.
Yeah. I'm quite interested in what you said about young people, and yeah, I definitely feel, this is not a question, I'm just going to talk. I just definitely feel that there's this kind of, with adults, you're trying to reverse patterns, and there's so much potential with creating a playfulness for children to like be detectives and actually create a passion for finding facts. And that's, work for a theater company, and we're in the creative realm, and we are working with that right now, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think it's so important, and I mean, my parents are the same. It's like, we're all like, our parents are like, it's like, they're too far gone. I hate to say it, but it's like, I can't even engage with it. It's like, let's just talk about the weather now. We can't even, go, oh wait, climate change. Oh no, we can't even talk about the weather, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want
Tess, I don't want to subject, but you just literally created a game, right? That's why I wanted to invite you about disinformation with kids, which is great.
Yeah, so that has just been released on Apple today, actually. So yeah, it works with children 9 and up, and it's about digital literacy, and you have to keep your integrity score up and become a trusted source. You're a detective. So yeah, but it's free, totally not monetizable, and everything you're saying about like, how do you make money from this? I don't know, and I've been working for free for a long time. I'm just passionate about it, and I think that I wish there was more investment in young people to really try and get them to have these critical thinking skills and ask really difficult questions, and bring those conversations home to the dinner table and hold their parents accountable and challenge what their parents are saying, because we're basically, all of us, just been, I guess, brainwashed by our parents. That's basically what parenting is.
No, well, I mean, and I don't mean to interject, but Anthony, I was wondering, like, how, not just marketing, but how do you have any kind of, I haven't used your system, like, do you kind of like have some kind of empathy for people and what they've been brought up learning or whatever, where it's like, I can see why you would think this was, a fact, but, blah, blah, blah. Like, I thought that the empowering part of like putting in your own sources, or, I mean, we really are hitting it from all angles, but like stuff like that, like how do you reach this other generation? Like, I think it's the same challenge for climate change, and I see, some things like Oatly, I feel like they're really trying to get at this kind of generational marketing, so to speak. And I really am a big believer of that, not to be an ageist in any way, shape or form, but I just think we've all lived through different eras with different, facts were easier or seemingly easier a long time ago when we all didn't have access to the internet at everyone's fingertips, challenging and questioning things, right?
Yeah, there was this golden age, right, when the internet was brand new. No one had worked out how to advertise and make money from it, and it was kind of this pure, innocent thing where we're just sharing information freely. And Wikipedia just got created. I remember that moment when Wikipedia got that. I can't remember who did the scoring, but compared it to the encyclopedias, and Wikipedia was more accurate than the encyclopedias. And it was like this awesome time. And I've lived, and it's weird, I'm old enough to live through that. But I remember the time in 2006, 2007, when Twitter was, and by the way, I'll share that too. If you just kind of hook me up afterwards, I'll definitely share that through our channels. And selling that to school districts and to governorships, surely there must be a way we can help you do that, but it's another point. But so 2006, 2007, Twitter was almost brand new. And I remember seeing, I think people were sharing information on wildfires. So there's a wildfire, I think it was actually in the US, and people were literally tweeting I'm here, where's the fire? And people tweeting, the fire's here, get over here. That amazing, and I remember being amazed by that free-flowing information, because it never happened before. Like, you can connect with anyone in the world and you can make their lives better. Was awesome. And I saw, for me, the peak of the positivity of what we can achieve with social media in 2010, 2011. I was in Egypt, and this was basically the fall of Mubarak, right? This is a non-democratic country that decided it wanted a democratic government, or at least it wanted a different government to Mubarak, and organized themselves on social media and through BlackBerry Messenger and other forms, organized themselves quicker than the security apparatus had ever had to respond before, but also sharing those stories with the world and getting international support for their position, to the point where they got a brand new government. And I went in straight. I was on the first diplomatic mission from the UK into Egypt. After that, I saw the result. And for me, it was like, what an amazing tool social media is. You can get anything you want if enough people want it, including a brand new government. Or that was tried more recently to less success. So like, it's there, and it's there for us all to use. But it has been abused. And those safeguards took a long while to come into place. So obviously from 2012 through to now, it's got steadily more advertising heavy as Twitter and Facebook both realized that's exactly where they needed to go in order to make their money. It's got steadily more and more advertising heavy. The algorithms have got smarter. The targeting has got more accurate, to the point where now it's being abused by people making money from disinformation. But the safeguards have taken years to come into place, which is why our parents and have now been exposed to a long period of that misinformation for a period where there were no safeguards. I am hopeful that by the time our children come on social media, will again have got a lot better doing that. But we've got this period where people have been influenced, and we can't get away from that now. My dad, from the period of like getting straight onto Facebook, only had 2 or 3 years of access to the good version of Facebook and Twitter before he was hit with all the bad stuff. Whereas I lived, I was an early adopter, and I lived through a longer period of it being positive. So yeah, I think for me, I definitely have empathy for the people that struggle with it. And like I said, I've seen it. I've seen the start of the journey, not from a social media perspective, from a traditional media perspective. I've seen what happens to children growing up in situations where all they see in the traditional media headlines is Muslim, blah, blah, blah, terrorist. And that's all they're exposed to. They don't see any positive role models or any positive way out of that situation. It's like, well, might as well just be a terrorist, because that's the route I've been driven down. And the risk of those guys getting radicalized, because it takes no effort for an Al-Qaeda or Taliban or an ISIS now to say, look, here's what they talk about you. They're already calling you it. They're just waiting to put you in Guantanamo. Come and be a hero, come and have a part of a society that actually cares about you. That I have absolute empathy for it. It's actually the reason I got into the thing. Everyone has their own little story, right? The reason why it makes them passionate. That for me, seeing what happened to those kids and actually what happened to some of those kids getting into terrorism was really hard for me. And that's where I get my heart for this problem from.
Definitely. Con or Linda, do you have anything? I want to make sure you have a chance.
Yeah, I actually have a question. Firstly, thanks, Anthony. This is a fascinating discussion. Great to hear from you. I'm just a little interested in how is it that you fact check your data sets, and how is it that you sort of keep it real time in some ways. And let's say if you identify that there is a certain area that you need to create a new data set, how is it that you sort of go about it? Whatever you can share, because I'm working on a couple of things, just to sort of understand how the approach to creating data sets themselves. Yeah,
so we have kind of two forms of data sets that make their way into the product. So on the underlying models themselves, those are primarily publicly available data sets. So we scour the internet like most people, look at the research, look at the groups doing this kind of work, and if we've for hate speech, for toxicity, there's plenty of research out there to keep the models current. We go to those research, and obviously for that research to be published, all those data sets need to be public. So we use those publicly available trusted data sets, and we use multiple versions of those to give us as accurate a broader picture as possible. So on our hate speech model, there's like 5 or 6 different publicly available data sets we've used to identify what is hate speech. And then obviously we've used the trusted news and the bleeper, the human in the loop aspect to feedback on those models since then. So that's on training the models, those data sets. In terms of the data sets that go into the narrative monitoring product, I think it tells you what's going on. Effectively, that's just straight from the internet. We're not looking at like factual data sets or fact stores, and we're looking at what is being said. Because what we're trying to do is look at what is actually being said and using our models to identify the risk of that containing any of those kind of, hate speech, racism, toxicity, etc. So we're not doing this is the truth, this is the fact. We're not doing that. What we're enabling people to do is identify the kind of content they might want to look at to then use like a fact-checking tool or a fact-checking company, or to just counter themselves because they know it sells themselves to be false in the case of Pfizer. So, if we're selling to Pfizer, we're getting our data from Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, blogs, articles. We're getting our data literally straight from the internet. We're collating it together into a single data set, running our models over that data set and saying, flagged toxic on this particular narrative, racist on this particular narrative. And then if you're Pfizer, you're looking through those narratives and going, Pfizer vaccine gives you cancer, which has been flagged for, hate speech and whatever. And then that's something you can deal with. So I've seen that content. Pfizer can now engage with that content and go, right, who are the influencers behind that? What are they saying? Here's the facts they're using to try and drive that particular narrative. Therefore, I shall deploy facts Y, right? My facts, the industry facts to counter that narrative. So we're just flagging for those companies the narratives they want to get engaged with. But from our point of view, we don't want to be the ones telling people what the facts are. That's not our bag. We want to be flagging and allowing other companies to do the fact checking or the countering of those lies themselves.
So would you think that your tools would be, because I'm just thinking about like if you had like a whole, whatever, the whole C-suite or like, or the PR team, like who are you marketing to? Like, does everyone get access? Like, how do you best advise them to use the tool when, you usually have more than one decision maker in the room? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If you have 4 people on board and the other 5 are, not carrying that, you know what I mean? It's like, who is really carrying the torch, or who do you find is the best person to use this tool and makes the most impact?
Got it. So, the end goal, right, is taking one a big, like a Novartis or a big pharma company. These are the guys who actually making the products, engaging people, and they're the ones having direct contact with the end user or the consumer. So they're really our target. They're the ones we want to provide the information, the facts, the authority to engage in narratives to help. They have to be the ones to take responsibility for the conversations revolving their products and their services. But Novartis is a huge company to try and sell to. And if it's to do with, only because I was talking to them earlier, if there's some allegation of greenwashing or of unsustainability in Novartis practices, then actually it's a company like Qantas International, right? It's a sustainability communications consultancy that's actually going to do that work for Novartis. None of those giant brands do that much themselves. They all work with agencies, social media agencies, PR agencies, brand agencies, all of those kind of supporting services. So our route to get our product to add the value for Novartis to the end consumer is actually to find the people who are selling in the social media and the media and the PR agency services to those companies and sell to those guys, because it's a lot quicker, it's a lot easier. You're probably only dealing with 2 or 3 decision makers, not a board. So yeah, that's our route to market is we're working directly with the agencies providing the services to these guys because they're the ones doing the work anyway.
That makes sense. Linda, did you have something? I know we only have 5 minutes left.
That's right, time flies. It's such a super interesting topic, really, and it's also personally for me close to heart. I have one of those parents as well, and my partner as well, and I know lots of friends that get to say. So it's really a big issue these days, and it's something that I'm thinking about it every day, more or less. And I see every time I meet my parents, it's always the same discussions. It's always going round and round. And I think it's something that we need to focus more on, how to tackle this. And it needs to get more up in the surface. And this is one of the first events that I have the opportunity to join and really talk about it, and deep dive into it. And it should be
more discussions and more workshops and more innovations and more co-creations around, okay, so guys, we have to fix this problem. How do we really do it? Like, what are the smartest tools to use? Yeah. I know there is so much out there, so much happening, and I'm glad to see that this is bubbling so much, and now we're actually going to some action. That's where I feel that we're at. We're beginning of the action, because so many people of my peers have realized that this is a real problem. It's in our closest family, and we cannot take it anymore, you know? And we have to do something about it. Yeah. So I'm very happy to see this.
Thank you, Linda.
I realize I have a bit of a background noise here, so I will mute myself again. I just want to say thank you a lot, and I love the topic.
I just wanted to circle back to answer, and you can answer it how you will, but to Vinny's question, like, how can individuals use this? Because it sounds like, I mean, individuals are decision makers in all of this, and I mean, I think there is really going to be a hunger for this. And people wanting to, you know, spread the word and inherently get into, you know, help people start to become these fact finders and these sleuths, like Tess is saying, you know, from their parents to their children, you know, to their coworkers, you know, and we're talking about, you know, more and more activism within our, you know, positive activism that's happening within our companies. So do you have plans to open up for individuals, or do you see a market for that?
For sure. I think we do have some kind of broad future plans of a social network based solely on this, you know, finding that content, discussing it. And it really, for us, is the discussion around it. Like, the subjective nature of the truth deserves discussion. So like, I saw an interesting one the other day, discussion, this is slightly off topic, but the discussion between guys and folks, right? Is guys now a gender neutral term or not? Is that, you know, is it sexist for people to use that term if they're using it broadly to describe a group of people that contains men and women, and those kind of discussions? Random, I don't know where I picked that one from, but discussions around that. We've got to have the discussions, and actually I think in terms of that particular term, it's not, you should be using folks in general. Just want to get that one clear. Like, the discussions around those kind of things, we all need to educate each other, and it needs to be discussion, because I think the challenge with any one company saying it's this is that the people who've already been so far gone will just reject that decision has been made because they weren't part of the conversation, they weren't part of the discussion or the decision. So getting a social network together where all these kind of conversations could be held, we can engage in conversation what is and is not. How we're not going to make that social network itself the most toxic place on the planet, I'm not sure. We'll have to think about it. But to answer your question about individuals getting involved, our Trusted News Chrome plugin, it really does feed into our algorithm. That's useful. It's okay right now. We've got a lot more investment want to do it, and we're make it available. The other thing we've got is threat score. So this will be freely available for anybody to sign up, enter in a topic, and see the top 5 positive and negative narratives and the top 5 positive and negative influences, and an overall threat score based on a combination of the toxicity, the racism, the sexism, and all those other things circulating about that topic. So if that topic is near and dear to your heart, that's something you care about, you could use that for free and see what's going on in that topic, and then engage in conversation on the back of that. The actual product suite itself, it's difficult to make that available to individuals, although we are going to make it available for free to journalists. Yeah. So that's kind of how we're tackling it.
I just am curious about this, because I would love to know about this, but like, I almost like, I'm so curious about like a disinformation, like news feed, like just around the topic, because I do feel like sometimes, like you were saying with the fire and whatever, like, I feel like when you see like, oh, how a disinformation led to a real event that had consequences, you know, and wow, this actually happened because of it. You can see the pitfalls of it. Whereas we still have that thing, you know, I don't know if you guys saw the QAnon documentary, it was very good. But like, it is really until people start to see the real results, because people still have that thing with internet that it's not going to have to actually really affect people. And I think a lot of things, even generationally, like until they can really see that somebody else is getting hurt by enabling these things or not being proactive with them, I think it doesn't hit a lot of people, and it feels very passive. So yeah. I'm just so interested about that, like in terms of news out there. And also I feel like if people started to expose, just like that New York Times article I mentioned today about how there's really are these firms that are just doing these, and these real actual influences that are coming forward saying, I've been contacted by this, that, and the other thing, like it really starts to show that this is more of a network rather than just a casual fun Facebook feed or whatever. People start to understand the business behind it. And then I think people's, come to their own realizations. So I'm just curious if you know something that's out there like that, or it's just something that's not pulled together at this point.
We've already got some sources I can look at to pull together. And I think from our point of view, we want to work with partners on individual topics. So doing the analysis and bringing together those stories actually is quite a lot of work and research. And we're an outright tech company. So we want to find partners to work with, to provide the information, they can do the reports and get that out there. But actually, we're just not scaled for.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I'm just curious about it. I think it's just like, it's such a prominent topic. It's become a topic in and of itself in so many ways, Yeah,
you're right. Those case studies are super powerful in education.
Yeah, and they convince people and that you trust them. So, all right, well, listen, we're a couple minutes over, but you guys, this was great. And I'm so glad that this could happen. And yeah, these are the layers that we all need to think in terms of purpose business. It just can't be, we have a passion. It has to, top to bottom be sorted through. So really appreciate you taking the time. Vinny, thanks for making this happen. And have a great day wherever you are. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Okay.
Cheers, guys.
Ciao.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.